Today, I went to buy a new coffee machine. Did I need it? Nah, not really. The one I had before was a bit old, but fine. But it was a newer model. It was prettier, and more importantly, it was on sale. So I had to get it. But surely this type of decision making must be the exception. When it comes to way more important, life-changing decision, surely the cognitive processes must be different. So you're going to tell me that you chose your life rationally. You made a spreadsheet, you evaluated everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and then you went for it? Probably not. So today, we dive into cognitive biases and the things less obvious about decision making. We like to think of ourselves as masters of our mind, logical, calculating, and always in control. Therefore, it makes sense to think that all the decisions we make are rational. But what if they were not? What if we were just sophisticated storytellers able to rationalize after the fact any decisions made by an impulsive brain? No, but do you really realize what you're saying here? I mean, most company processes are built on a rational decision model. Imagine what that would mean in terms of hiring, goal setting, performance review, strategies. Okay, I see where you're going, but it's not the goal of this video. We just want to be curious, have a scientific approach, and really understand how our brain works. So as scientists, it's simple. If we can find just a clear example where decisions are not made rationally, then it means that something else is at play. Well, that sounds like a very healthy approach. So for that, let's go and meet Linda. Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Based on that, which of the following is more likely? Linda is a bank teller? Or Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement? Well, guess what? 85% of people chose bank teller and active in the feminist movement, which is actually completely irrational. Yes, rationally speaking, there is way more chances for Linda to just be a bank teller. If the second proposition is true, then so is the first one. So the correct logical choice would be to choose the first one. Linda is just a bank teller. This small experiment comes from real research made by two psychologists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. They did more and more research into what they started to call cognitive illusions, situations that seem to trick our brain into an illogical choice. Unfortunately, Amos Tversky passed away, but Daniel Kahneman continued the research and summarized it all into this fantastic book, Thinking Fast and Slow. If you want to learn more about cognitive biases, this is an amazing reference. Their main theory is that the brain actually operates under two separate cognitive processes. To illustrate that, let's do another exercise. If I ask you to put an emotion on each of those drawings, you will see that you answer pretty immediately and without any effort. Here we have surprise, anger, joy, sadness. It's pretty easy and quite fast. Now, if I ask you to compute this, not so easy, right? I mean, we manage, but it takes its toll and it takes quite a bit of time. That is the two systems theory, a cognitive model that says that the brain operates under two different systems. One that we call System 1, which is completely autonomous, non-conscious, requires a low amount of effort and is really fast. And another one that we call System 2. This one is control, completely conscious, but requires a lot of effort and is quite a bit slow. And because the brain is like a machine trying to optimize the resources it spends, the default system in use, the one in charge, the one that will take all the decisions, is actually System 1. System 2, Kahneman actually calls it the lazy controller, is more there to validate that the decisions taken by System 1 are right. The thing is that more often than not, System 2 will just not engage. The brain will think that the decision made by System 1 is perfectly logical and rational, and therefore, why spend more resources in activating a system that is quite demanding? This is what Kahneman and Tversky used to call cognitive illusions. Now, we more often than not refer to them as cognitive biases. Basically, systematic errors of judgment. And because they are systematic, it means that we are all affected by them. And even worse, there is certain situation that will tend to trigger those biases consistently. Okay, so you're gonna tell me that our brains are just stupid and evolved something so flawed? Not at all. On the contrary, this is actually extremely useful and powerful. Let me show you. I'm gonna show you two sets of letters. What I want you to do is to tell me with which set of letters you can construct a larger number of words in the English language. I know, it's the second one, the letters in blue here at the bottom. Correct, you're absolutely right. But the interesting thing here is how did you come up with that solution? Did you use extensive reasoning? Did you systematically went on and build each single word you could with each set of letters and then went to count them? Not really. Now, of course not. What you did is used one of the two following tricks. You might have tried to build a few words with each set of letters. With the first set, only on came up. While with the second set, you were quickly able to form cat, rat, and trap. 3 words compared to just one in the first set. So you stopped there. The thinking here is, because I can quickly find more words in the second set, it must be the one which has more words available. This is what's called an availability heuristic. The thing to notice is that this is not an extensive search. There is way more words you can build with both sets. Another trick your mind, or System 1, could have used is to decide that this original question is way too hard, but that there is far easier questions it can answer instead that should produce roughly the same result. For example, which sets of letters contains the more frequent letter in the English language? You answer right, but you did not answer the original question. This is called a substitution. Your System 1 substitute a hard question by a far easier one that it thinks will have the same answer. Yeah, the substitution one, that's the one I used. Amazing! And that shows you how powerful and cost-effective System 1 is. But the trick is that you use one of those heuristics of System 1 without being aware of it. From our perspective, our answers were completely logical and rational. However, rational decision making requires us to actively engage System 2, that, as we saw, is quite constraining. Therefore, in many situations, we will just prefer the speed and power of System 1. And again, rightfully so. There are many cases where you do not want to take the time to engage System 2. If someone crosses the street in front of you, you're not going to start to be rational and calculate their speed, your speed, the time it will take you to stop the car. No, you want an immediate decision based on heuristics. You want System 1 to act fast. So more often than not, this System 1 and System 2 act as a very well-oiled machine, until they encounter those peculiar situations where they produce those cognitive biases and our judgment is impeded. Okay, to understand all of that better, it's time to see a few examples. Let's start with a cognitive bias based on the availability heuristic. So remember, the availability heuristic is making decisions based on what's most recently available in my memory. Take something like performance review, for example. The question is, how well did John perform his role during the last 12 months? It's a really hard question. I need to think about John's role, I need to think about all the things John did in the last 12 months, I need to reconciliate all of that, and form an opinion. If I am not deliberate to answer that question, or maybe if I just cannot put in the effort, I don't know, maybe I'm just drowning in work, then what's going to happen is the availability heuristic might kick in. And instead of looking at John's performance over the last 12 months, I will do so only over the last 2 months, or maybe even worse, and just only look at the last 2 weeks. But I will do that completely unconsciously. Imagine this scenario with 2 people, John and Linda. John was an absolute superstar for 10 months, but he made a major mistake in the last 2 weeks. Linda struggled for 10 months, but she just saved us from a massive incident in production in the last 2 weeks. In this case, I really wouldn't want to be John. Yeah, mathematically speaking, John has a much better average than Linda, but will he really be evaluated that way? Or will the availability heuristic kicks in and give a better review to Linda? This is what's called the recency bias. It's a product of the availability heuristic, and it makes us take decisions based only on recent events and not on an overall picture of the facts over a longer period of time. Actually, it's a bit more complex than that. Depending on the complexity of the information, the brain might rely on a recency bias, as per your example, but there is also time where the brain could switch to a primacy bias. If the information in the data series is simple, the brain will tend to look only at the first data points to make its judgment. Overall, still, when there is a lot of data to evaluate, the brain will not look at all the data, but will start to prefer either the first element in the series or the last one. If you want to go deeper and understand the condition for the recency or the primacy bias to trigger, I put you the reference to the research paper in the description. So what can we do? I don't know, maybe we just abolish performance review and just recognize that they bring absolutely no value to anyone. Okay, maybe, but that's not the topic here. Let me know in the comments if you want to see our friend here do such a confronting video. No, let's stay on topic here. We actually have roughly 2 strategies. The first one is slowing down. By making sure we take the time to deliberately think about all the things that happened in the last 12 months, all the things that John and Linda do, we then have a chance to activate our system 2, temper a bit system 1, and have a much more rational evaluation of their performance. Another thing we can do is simply to take notes during those 12 months. By gathering data, we have a chance to make sure our judgment is way more holistic and fair. So actually taking notes is not enough. It will still trigger the recency bias when you will read them. You will simply evaluate the more recent note you read, so potentially the one you took last, as more important than all the rest. Oh, okay, so actually not only do we need to gather data, but we also need to define beforehand how we're going to use it and process it. Else we will still fall prey to the recency bias, and again we will have an error of judgment. So let's try to remember that, because that will be a constant when trying to fight biases. We need to slow down, gather data, and also don't forget we need to define processes to use this data. This is the thing most people forget when gathering data, is that you also need to define beforehand the data processing methods. Oh, we need an acronym to remember that. SDDP? Slow down data processes? Okay, now let's look at another example and another cognitive bias. This time, one that is using the substitution heuristic. So remember, that is when our brains substitute a hard question by another, much easier one. Take this hard question for example. Which of these 2 leaders would be the best moral leader for a nation? So we have this first candidate in blue here, who was kicked out of office twice. He worked from his bed and he drank whiskey every evening. We now have this other candidate in orange, who was a decorated veteran, who was vegetarian and vocal advocate for animal welfare, a non-smoker, and he also abstained from hard liquor. Not sure I want to be led by the candidate in blue. No, of course you don't, but again, because of a substitution. You're not even trying to answer that question of who would be the best moral leader for a nation. You just can't. You do not have enough information about those 2 persons. However, you still make a judgment by using the heuristics of System 1 and substituting that hard question by a much easier one. What are the most favorable traits for a moral leader? Of course, those favorable traits doesn't mean that the orange candidate is the better one. On the contrary, because those description fits for the blue one, Winston Churchill, as well as the orange one match the angry German man he fought against during World War II. This special case of substitution is called the halo effect. Our overall impression of a person, a product, a company is often derived from a few positive or negative traits we can observe early on and pushes us to infer additional quality or fault that might not be there. So you mean if I continue to criticize things and to be complaining, people will attribute me more negative traits? Yep. And the other one here with his science, you're telling me that then people will think he's so intelligent and so much better than me? That's it? But that makes no sense. We are the same person. But that's the thing about the halo effect. We judge people by this first impression, by the first one or two traits we can start to observe in them. This halo effect was first measured in 1920 by Thorndike. I put you the reference to his research paper in the description if you want to go read it. Since then, we've learned that it is way more than just a first impression thing. It is a systemic bias that leaks into how we judge almost everything, from the qualities of a product to the success of an entire company's strategy. Yet, we might need to revisit the halo effect for a much longer deep dive. But for now, let's look at this first impression most common problem: hiring. An interview is just designed to trigger the halo effect. We will start really liking a candidate just because they answer so well to our favorite question. I know I did that, and then completely potentially overlooking their technical ability. They answered so well to the culture fit question, so that must mean that their technical ability is also great. This is typical halo effect. That's why I highly recommend you to structure your interview process. Make sure you define a few categories beforehand that you will evaluate each candidate against. And also, don't forget to have a scoring function that can give you an overall evaluation of the candidate. Sure, your opinion and how you felt about the candidate still matter, but you want to make sure your judgment is not clouded by your biases and System 1. So we just want to make sure we are bringing back data and data processing into the hiring process. Else, I'm sorry to say that, but then the halo effect is doing your hiring for you. And we will stop there and end this video abruptly. Yes, because there is hundreds and hundreds of cognitive biases, and we only had the time to quickly look at 2. So are we in for hundreds of cognitive biases video? That sounds a bit dull. No, but I thought it was necessary to start here and lay the foundation for what we are going to talk about next. Because believe me, if a process or a way of thinking or doing in an organization appears obvious while it might not be, then most likely there is a cognitive biases at play or 2 here. And your coffee machine shopping spree, you still haven't told us what's the relationship with the topic here. Well, first, a form of the halo effect. The newer model is prettier, it really looks nice, therefore it must make a better coffee. And the fact that it's on sales plays on another bias called the anchoring effect. It's still a bias of System 1, but it relies on different heuristics than the ones we've seen today. We'll probably encounter it in another video though. Thank you all, that's it for today. Now if you like that video, please tell me in the comments, like it, share it, consider subscribing because more videos are coming soon. And please tell everyone around you about the things less obvious you've heard today.